What if I told you Traci Braxton secretly recorded her final wishes, and her family had no idea? Until the truth surfaced and everything they planned completely backfired. Traci Braxton left behind a private recording of her final wishes, something the family reportedly never knew existed. Now, here's where things take a turn. Today's story dives into how the Braxton family's attempt to control Traci's estate went terribly wrong. So wrong, in fact, that it could serve as a textbook example of how not to handle family affairs. To put it bluntly, their plan wasn't just flawed, it was amateurish. It felt less like a family strategy, and more like something dreamed up by a group of preschoolers playing pretend. You'd think someone, as seasoned in persuasion as Tawanda, would have known better. Honestly, my 2-year-old grandson, who's just learning to string words together, could have come up with a smarter plan. And no, they don't get credit for effort. Not even close. So, let's rewind to why Tawanda was so desperate for money in the first place. Back in April 2019, she filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the type that wipes the slate clean rather than repaying debts like Chapter 13. In her filing, she claimed $277,000 in assets, but listed over $547,000 in liabilities. That's more than $500,000 in the red dot now. $500,000 might not faze a mech, but for someone whose income came primarily from singing backup for Toni Braxton and occasionally assisting her sister, that's a huge deficit. Even Toni once expressed how her sisters financially drained her, saying only Tamar ever truly lent a hand. According to court documents, Tawanda reported earning about $4,692 a month while spending roughly $6,000. Her bank balance was just $150. And she was being sued by her landlord for a staggering $76,000 in unpaid rent. It raises the question, if you're making under $5,000 a month, why live in a place that costs far more than you can afford? It seems she fell into the trap of chasing a luxury image instead of financial stability. Sometimes, instead of keeping up with the Joneses, it's wiser to keep pace with the Jenkins down the street. Ultimately, the bankruptcy case was dismissed because of inaccuracies in her paperwork. In short, the court found dishonesty. That left her still drowning in debt. And that's when Sean Hall entered the picture, the man who, whether by luck or fate, became her financial safety net. Her family reportedly didn't approve of him, but he provided the stability she lacked. When I later released a video suggesting the Braxton sisters disapproved of Sean, and that tensions were rising over his relationship with Tawanda. Daughter Brooke Tawanda completely lost it. She didn't reach out to correct misinformation or clarify the story. Instead, she demanded the video be taken down immediately, threatening lawsuits and even dragging my mother into it. Most celebrities who feel misrepresented will at least try to set the record straight. They'll clarify, negotiate, or deny specific details. Tawanda, however, bypassed all of that. The outrage itself said a lot. Meanwhile, an insider I was working with at the time told me only a handful of people could have leaked that story. And yet, Tawanda instantly blamed Tamar. But why Tamar? Why assume it was her instead of someone from her camp? That reaction spoke volumes. And for the record, no credible journalist or blogger would ever burn a source. So no, even if it was Tamar, that's not something anyone would reveal. The bigger issue here is how chaotic and defensive the situation became, a perfect storm of secrecy, money problems, and mistrust that exposed much more than Tawanda probably intended. What happened next took an unsettling turn. As Tawanda's anger toward me exploded, something even stranger started happening. Sean began quietly cleaning up his social media. Photos of Brooke, the ones where he affectionately called her Brookie, started disappearing overnight. The sudden purge felt calculated and, frankly, unnerving. Now, looking back, I don't believe Sean ever crossed any serious boundaries with Brooke. I think he's simply eccentric. The kind of man who dances to the rhythm of his own drum, a little offbeat. Maybe even a throwback to a free-spirited hippie type who lives in his own world. Even Andre, who asked his daughter directly about the rumors, said she denied anything inappropriate had happened. Still, when it comes to sensitive situations like that, I always lean toward believing the potential victim first. That said, I've always felt Tawanda stayed with Sean because he provided what she couldn't give herself: financial stability. In my view, when Traci fell ill, Tawanda saw a grim opportunity. She may have believed that controlling Traci's image, music rights, and legacy could offer her a new financial lifeline. It's uncomfortable to say, but I genuinely think that was part of her motive. When Tawanda realized Traci planned to leave her estate entirely to her son, Kevin Jr., She allegedly began devising a way to intervene to shift control, and as manipulative as it sounds, people really do operate like this when money and legacy are on the line. Just look at how the family revived Braxton family values after Traci's passing. The public story was that they wanted to honor Traci's memory and share their grief as a close-knit family, but behind the scenes, it looked more like a strategic move, a way to reshape the narrative around her death and their relationships. That's even how they convinced Tamar and Tony to rejoin the show. They sold it as a tribute. Let's do this for Traci. Let's tell her story. It was only supposed to last a single season, yet what lingered beneath was something far more orchestrated. Either Evelyn Braxton, Mama E, was part of the plan from the start, or Tawanda persuaded her to join later. Either way, the scheme seemed to have two clear objectives. The first was to paint Kevin Sr., Traci's husband, as a villain, greedy, unfaithful, and opportunistic. They even spread the claim that he fathered a child outside the marriage, when in truth, that child came from a relationship before he met Traci. The difference between the two versions of that story is night and day. The second step was more psychological. They targeted Kevin Jr. himself. They allegedly started feeding him doubts about his father, convincing him that Kevin Sr. was untrustworthy and motivated by money. And here's what makes that manipulation so cruel. Kevin Jr. wasn't just grieving his mother, he was also mourning his cousin and best friend, Lauren Braxton. The emotional weight of both losses at once left him incredibly vulnerable. Rumors even surfaced that during this dark period, Kevin Jr. was self-medicating. When I interviewed his father about it, he denied knowing anything for sure, but reports of Kevin Jr. fainting, seizing, and losing consciousness suggested he was struggling with something deeper. Meanwhile, the whispers kept coming. "We're your family. You can trust us. Your father only married your mom for fame." Those words, repeated over and over, started shaping his perception. It's likely why he once snapped, "I was born into this family, you married into it." It was the echo of their manipulation, spoken by a son who wasn't in his right state of mind. Kevin Jr. was drowning in grief, and from where I stand, it seemed he was also leaning on substances to numb the pain. That kind of vulnerability creates the perfect storm for manipulation. If someone could influence him, they could influence access to Traci's estate, and ultimately, her money. Once they had his trust, they could get him to move however they wanted. This, I believe, is why most of the Braxton sisters skipped Traci's funeral. Mikey and their father showed up, but the others stayed away, not out of protest or pain, but because it was part of their so-called plan. They wanted the world to believe Kevin Sr. had defied Traci's final wishes by holding a funeral she never wanted. They spun the story that she hadn't left him a dime because she didn't trust him. In their minds, they were the righteous protectors of Traci's legacy when really, they were orchestrating a deception. What I still question is whether Mama E, Evelyn Braxton, was aware of what was going on or whether Tawanda pulled her into it later. Meanwhile, Tawanda positioned herself as Kevin Jr.'s confidant, his best friend during his darkest time, while taking advantage of his fragile, grief-stricken state. What she didn't anticipate, however, was that Traci had already safeguarded herself. Before her passing, Traci met with her attorney to record a video laying out exactly what she wanted: her will, her estate, her funeral wishes, everything on camera. No one in the family knew those recordings existed, and when they eventually surfaced, they shattered the sisters' carefully built narrative. And then there was Trina. Let me be clear. I don't have personal animosity toward her, but her behavior has long raised red flags. She's admitted to struggling with alcohol, and from the outside, it seems she may have leaned on prescription pills as well. In my opinion, Trina doesn't think for herself. She simply aligns with whoever seems most influential at the time. Perhaps that's why she's always seemed burdened by guilt, especially when the names Ashley and Gabe come up. Rumors have long circulated about Gabe's dark past, that his so-called parties involved underage girls and trans women, and that Trina may have known more than she let on. Whether those rumors are fully true or not, her discomfort whenever those topics surface is hard to miss. When the producers of Braxton Family Values saw the growing distance between Kevin Jr. and his father, they saw potential for a heartfelt storyline, a chance to heal the family. But Tawanda couldn't let that happen. Reconciliation would have unraveled everything she'd built. So when the idea of inviting Kevin Sr. on the show came up, she erupted. Like most manipulators, she escalated. She began rewriting history itself, claiming Kevin Sr. wasn't just greedy, but that he'd manipulated Traci's emotions and that Traci had supported the sisters' 1990s record deal that once caused family rifts. That's how deception works. A good con artist always goes one step too far. Tawanda insisted, "We didn't attend that funeral because it wasn't what Traci wanted." But here's the question no one seems to ask. Did Traci truly say she wanted no funeral at all? Or did she simply want something more joyful? A celebration of life? If it was the latter, then that's exactly what she got. Still, the sisters kept doubling down publicly, painting themselves as guardians of Traci's legacy. Tawanda even declared, "I've always fought for Traci, and I'll keep fighting for her forever." But where was that fight when she and Trina signed a record deal that pushed Traci out of the group years earlier? Trina chimed in too, echoing the same scripted defense. "We didn't leave our sister out, it was all just a misunderstanding." She claimed Traci herself approved the deal, that she gave them her blessing to move forward. Really, are we supposed to believe Traci willingly agreed to be excluded from her own family's music group? The same Traci who always longed to be part of it. Let's not forget, Tawanda was once accused of stealing from her own mother. So if anyone's version of events deserves a little skepticism, it's hers. The sisters can revise history all they want, but the truth has a way of finding its voice, and this time, it's speaking through Traci's own words, preserved on that recording she left behind. Let's break this down. When Traci spoke about what happened years ago, she didn't sound like someone giving her sisters her blessing. She was honest, vulnerable, even explaining that she got pregnant and chose motherhood over the music industry. While others made different choices, her words weren't approval. They were regret mixed with acceptance, so when the sisters later claimed Traci supported their decision to move on without her, it just doesn't add up. It's absurd, honestly. And let's not forget, I met Traci during the time when the Braxton sisters were boycotting the network. She went on to film The Next 15 with Flavor Flav and Phaedra Parks, and barely even mentioned her family. At that time, she seemed completely detached from them. So this picture they've tried to paint of perfect sisterly unity, it doesn't match the reality. Now here's where everything unraveled. Tawanda's elaborate plan to seize control of Traci's estate would have worked flawlessly. The public might have even believed it, if not for one crucial twist. Traci had been one step ahead of them all. Before she passed, Traci recorded private videos with her attorney, outlining every detail of her final wishes, who she trusted, what she wanted, and what she didn't. In those recordings, she made it crystal clear that she had already chosen one person to handle her legacy, her husband. Kevin Sr. Traci trusted him completely. In one video, he recalled her saying, "If anything ever happens to me, I'm putting everything in your name." She also stated she didn't want a traditional funeral service, not because she lacked love for her sorority sisters or family, but because she didn't want her loved ones to suffer watching her be laid to rest. She wanted joy, not sorrow. She wanted celebration, not mourning. And the Braxton sisters, they had no clue those tapes existed. When the truth finally surfaced, Tawanda's panic was obvious. Reports say the moment Trina returned to the rental house after meeting with the attorney, Sean and Tawanda rushed over, desperate to hear what was said, but what they heard left them shaken. And it changed everything. Those recordings didn't just challenge the Braxton sisters' story, they obliterated it. Every narrative they had carefully crafted, every emotional appeal they made to the public, came crashing down the moment those tapes surfaced. The claim that Traci didn't trust her husband, false. The suggestion that she left behind no will or no money, also false. And the idea that her sisters were the rightful guardians of her legacy, that too, was pure fiction. The truth, plain and simple, was that Traci had already made her intentions known long before her passing. She was meticulous about it. She took the time to sit down with her attorney and record on video what she wanted, who she trusted, and why. And she didn't do it in secrecy out of spite. She did it to ensure that no one could ever rewrite her wishes or manipulate her son and husband after she was gone. That, right there, shows you the level of foresight Traci possessed. She understood how complicated family dynamics could become once money, fame, and legacy entered the equation. She'd seen it play out for years, both within her own family and within the entertainment industry. So she protected herself the only way she knew how, by leaving behind undeniable proof. In those recordings, Traci expressed deep trust in her husband, Kevin Sr. She made it clear that he wasn't just her spouse, he was her partner, her confidant, and the person she believed would carry her legacy forward with love and integrity. "If anything ever happens to me," she reportedly told him, "I'm putting everything in your name." Those weren't the words of a woman filled with doubt or resentment. Those were the words of someone who knew exactly who had her back. She also explained her choice not to have a traditional funeral. It wasn't a rejection of her family, her sorority sisters, or the people who adored her. It was an act of compassion. Traci didn't want those she loved most to sit in sorrow, staring down at her casket. She wanted them to celebrate her life, to remember her laughter, her voice, her spirit. That was Traci, the heart of the Braxton family, full of quiet strength and unwavering faith. But that truth didn't fit the story the sisters wanted to tell. For them, the narrative of a misunderstood widow and a grieving son under their protection was far more convenient. It painted them as caretakers of Traci's legacy rather than people who had pushed her to the margins for years. Once the recordings came to light, the entire tone shifted. Behind closed doors, panic set in. You could see it in their interviews, in their statements, even in their body language. Towanda, especially, appeared shaken. For someone who had spent so much time crafting control, suddenly, she had none. According to accounts, the moment Trina returned to the rental house after meeting with the family's attorney, Sean and Towanda rushed over, desperate to hear what was said. They were nervous, on edge, hoping there wouldn't be any surprises. But what they heard wasn't just surprising, it was devastating to their plan. Traci had been one step ahead all along, and now her voice preserved on camera was undeniable. Imagine that moment. Years of quiet manipulation, whispered half-truths, and carefully orchestrated interviews suddenly unraveling because one woman had the foresight to protect her legacy. It's poetic justice in its purest form. And here's where the irony deepens. If the sisters had simply honored Traci's wishes from the start, if they had shown grace and unity rather than suspicion and control, this entire ordeal might have played out differently. The family could have stood together in her memory, healing through love instead of tearing each other apart through greed and pride. But instead, they chose control over compassion. They chose secrecy over transparency, and that choice backfired spectacularly. The existence of those recordings did more than preserve Traci's voice. They exposed the cracks within the Braxton family. Suddenly, fans began asking hard questions. Why weren't the sisters at the funeral? Why did their stories about Traci's wishes keep changing? Why did they seem more focused on shaping the narrative than honoring her truth? Even casual observers could see that something wasn't adding up. The timing of their interviews, the tone of their statements, everything felt rehearsed. The public sympathy they had once relied on began to shift toward Kevin Sr. and Kevin Jr., especially as more information about the recordings surfaced. It also raised a larger issue, one that goes beyond celebrity families. When a loved one passes, grief and money can create an explosive mix. Even the most loving families can fracture under the pressure of estate disputes, especially when unresolved tensions and egos are involved. Traci's story, tragic as it is, serves as a lesson about the importance of making your wishes known and protecting them legally. What Traci did was wise. She didn't just trust words or promises, she documented everything. She used her voice literally to safeguard her legacy from manipulation. And in doing so, she gave her son and husband the greatest gift possible: clarity now. Of course, the sisters could have chosen to apologize or acknowledge the misunderstanding once the truth came out, but instead, they seemed to double down, clinging to a story that no longer held weight. Maybe pride wouldn't let them admit they were wrong, or maybe it was guilt. Either way, the damage was done. For Towanda, the exposure of those tapes must have been a blow. Every piece of the plan she allegedly set in motion, from influencing Kevin Jr. to controlling public perception, came undone because Traci had outsmarted them quietly, gracefully, and completely. And while some may see this as family drama, there's something deeper here, something human. It's a story about betrayal, yes, but also about foresight, trust, and the power of truth. In life, Traci may have been overlooked or underestimated by her family, but in death, she became the author of her own justice. Those recordings weren't just legal documents, they were a declaration of independence, a way for her to speak, even when she no longer could.